to understand the way of thy precepts. So shall I talk of thy wondrous works. My soul melteth for heaviness. Strengthen thou me according to thy word. Remove from me the way of lying.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. Picking up, Jesus has finished talking about the parable of the tares. And then he says this to them. Jesus saith unto them, Have ye understood all these things? They said unto him, or they say unto him, Yea, Lord. Then said he unto them, Therefore every scribe which is instructed unto the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which bringeth forth out of his treasure things new and old. And it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these sayings, these parables, he departed thence. I gotta stop reading it before I see it. So there's the last parable of this chapter. An householder who brings out of his treasure things new and old. And I guess the image that conjures in my mind of like, this is someone, I'm a householder. I have a house, I hold it. And so, you know, if someone were to come visiting, I could show them of my things, you know, that I have. I could show a few heirlooms from my ancestors, old things, things that have been around a long time, things that have been in my family for years, but also new things, things I've been doing right now, things I've been finding out, things I've been building. And that's what he's saying is that every scribe, when he refers to someone as a scribe, what is a scribe? A scribe is a literate person of his time. You know, they're the people who teach the law because they can read it. You know, they're the literate people, the people who are instructed in the law. They're saying that the people who are literate in the kingdom of God bring forth new and old things. You know, the old familiar, but also the new. And for some people that, I feel like sometimes in church and stuff, it's all old. It's all the old stuff. It's like, this is what Martin Luther thought. This is what Calvin thought. This is what Pope whoever thought. But you know, there's all. But I'm not gonna say every denomination is like that. Okay, but we don't want to all be just stuck in tradition. But bringing out the good things of tradition, but also that God is so big that he is able to show each and every one of us new things without changing anything necessarily. Like, I've been studying for years, and I consistently still run across new thoughts or new angles, new ways to look at the things that God has revealed. That's in the scriptures, but also in my life, I have new experiences to share. There are new things to share. There are new truths. They're not new truths, but they're new ways of expressing the truth that become obvious to us or become revealed to us through the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is so, you know, the God is so big that he does not and has not, that's a weird screen, okay, has not given to, you know, any one person all the truth. any more than any householder can have all the goods. So if you understand these things, you can understand, new and old, and expand your understanding. Okay, I don't think there's a lot to say about that. Maybe on some other occasion I'll have more to say, see? But it seems pretty simple, like, you think about the parables of the last few chapters, those were new at that time. And we can still gain new insights on everything we find in the scriptures. And those new insights can be useful to us right now. So let's be scribes. Let us be literate in God's kingdom and ready to bring forth not just the old, but the new. And not just the new, but the old. There's something about the tried and true that should not be ignored. It should not, pure novelty is not a virtue. I mean, just the idea that because something is new, it is somehow better is not a good idea either. Jesus talks about no man having tasted old wine desires the new because he's tasted the old, and he says the old is better. And he may be right, but neither should someone be like, well, that's the old. Yeah, let's just go with the new. We don't like it. We want something new. We want something new. And I think sometimes the obsession with novelty can lead us astray. And so that's why he says things both new and old. Do not be overly zealous for the new without having proper due respect for the old. If you haven't steeped yourself in the old, it may not be appropriate for you to bring forth new, because you're not building on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. You're building on the foundation of your own understanding or God knows what. You're not building on any kind of foundation at all. You have to have a foundation of the old on which to build new, or you ought to. You shouldn't just try to, I'm just going to start from scratch. It's like that's not wise either. Okay, and when he was coming to his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, and so much that they were astonished, and said, Whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? And his brethren, James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? And I used to point out, look at, Jesus has brothers. And for the Catholics, I know that Mary's a perpetual virgin, and they say, well, these are his cousins or something like that. His brothers in some other sense. And you can, whatever. It's not an important issue to me. Like refuting that, it's like, I try to focus on useful truths rather than just tearing down people's beliefs. It seems to me just your reverence for Mary is, as long as whatever. I'm so out of tune with that. It's like, because I'm just not a reverencer of men. Jesus had just got to, who's my mother? If she was an exalted person. And it wasn't a denigration so much as it was saying, my priorities are with those who are fixated on the kingdom of God, as opposed to those who are fixated on earthly things. And this is, the people of the community where he grew up, they're fixated on the earthly things. Well, we know his mother, we know his brothers, we know his sisters. Aren't they with us? Aren't they among us? They still live here. Whence hath this man all these? Where does he get all this stuff? They'd heard of his mighty works. He did some mighty works. It says he didn't do many with them. Why? And they were offended at him. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. They didn't believe in him principally because they knew him. Because he had grown up there. And they said, this man can't be a prophet. This man can't be the Messiah. Why? Because, he's one of us. It's that sort of familiarity having bred contempt. And it's not to say that he was a bad person among them. No, this is the carpenter's son. We know him. Maybe they already hated him. They already had contempt for him. He's Mr. Little. For women, they say, "Oh, little Miss Goody Two Shoes." He was already perhaps seen as a bit much. A bit up. He's so upright. Sometimes people, common folks despise upright folks very often. If you don't engage in the same kind of profane behavior as they do, you can often be looked down upon for having chosen a more upright path. Not even for speaking. You don't even have to speak against people. Sometimes you're just refusal to participate in behaviors. I remember this is where peer pressure comes from. It's like kids are smoking and you're like, no. And then it's like they kind of are like, they want to know why. And maybe, they think, well, what, are you better than us? And it's not just with, smoking maybe isn't such a great example, but you might think of examples. I remember examples growing up where it was kind of like you're set apart trying to maintain your integrity. And when I was growing up, my social status was far more important to me than my integrity. And so I think I was somewhat of I was a child that tended towards following the rules and doing I don't know about good, but not giving, not breaking the rules, let's say that. I tended towards avoiding, I thought if the rules are the rules, you should not break them. I was reluctant. But then when it started costing me something socially, when it was a question of pleasing friends or making myself more popular, I gladly laid aside any thought of doing the right thing just to obtain the momentary approval. It was so, I mean, what is, I don't even know what the heck I was trying to obtain, because it's like, how impressed could they be? He just broke down his standards and joined us. They have pleasure in themselves. It's sort of more of an affirmation of themselves. I don't really know that I gained anything in giving into peer pressure, but I thought I was gaining something. I was making other people pleased with me, if nothing else, instead of being something that was like a reminder of their imperfections and their having, not lived up to a standard that they may also have been aware that was a standard, whether it be righteousness of drugs, sex, mostly those two. Growing up. But Jesus, he was doubtless, we know he was righteous And so among his peers, you know, he would not have been, he would have been exceptional. And though he was quiet for most of his life, when he finally opened up and began his ministry, the shock was too great because they were too familiar with him. They didn't know him that well, but they knew of him, and they knew of his mother and his brethren and his sisters. And the thought that this guy was doing mighty works and stuff, it's like now was like, look, we know him. It's not saying like, he was a bad boy in high school, but then now, if he'd been, I almost want to. Sometimes people delight in the story of the bad boy turned good, and you gotta wonder if then maybe they would have thought more of him if he had been more one of them and less exceptional. It's hard to tell, but a prophet is not without honor. Prophets gain honor. The farther I travel from home, the more honor I get. And I'm not saying, well, whatever. I'm not saying anything except just music. When I go do my music thing, when I remember the worst I was ever treated was going back to the suburbs to a church near where I grew up, and they were not. I'd been invited there to play, and I played them something, and they even cut me off in the middle of my playing and rudely entreated me. Not all of them, but the minister of music did. All it takes is one, and it pissed me off. I was auditioning. I remember, and the priest was like, he didn't like it at all. They needed something that was going to bring people in, new people in, because their little stinking church was dying because they had this 70-year-old priest, whatever, I forget which old stultified denomination it was, but they had this old guy. They had this huge, they had their they could seat several hundred people in their sanctuary, whatever you want to call it, and the old priest, you could tell he was boring. No one was coming to hear him. And the minister of music confided in me that one of the things they wanted to do was bring in something new, something different, to try to attract people. And they listened to my music, and it did not please them. And they cut me off in the middle of my audition. I had traveled 100 miles. And you can bet I didn't like it. I was like, it's rude. And plus, you don't even know, like you're defiling something sacred right here in the midst of the sanctuary. You think you will do well. You think you bring in rock bands, people are going to come listening to your old preacher who has nothing new to say, who's not a preacher, he's a sleeper. You think they think they bring in a rock band, it's going to revitalize their... I don't know what the hell they wanted. Like, you haven't listened to my music online first? It was like they didn't understand. There were a couple of people there I thought were, but a couple of the elders who viewed, one or two seemed like very pleasant and nice. But I was distracted by all the ones that were very unnice. I remember that. I remember walking out. I was ticked off because I was treated badly. But farther from my hometown, where I've moved to now, I've been treated better. But I've been treated most best when I've traveled farthest from where they know me. And because people are just naturally, better to strangers. To people who are from, if someone travels a long way to come. Though the place that was nearest the way I was born, like I said, I traveled 100 miles to go there, to go back. But it was within, I'd only recently moved away. it was while I was still actually traveling back for Bible studies with old friends. Because when I moved out here to Northwest Illinois, I'm originally from the Chicago area, from the suburbs, and I used to go back every weekend, or every other weekend at least. I think it was every other weekend. Or it became every other weekend at some point. I don't know. Maybe it was every weekend. I forget. I remember my wife enjoyed me taking the kids so she would have some time to do some chores. But I used to go back for Bible studies, and at that time I also auditioned for some church that was trying to revitalize, but they didn't want to They didn't want to take a risk on something that was like stunningly serious. I doubt their priest was probably trying to. I don't know if it was a Protestant denomination. It wasn't a priest, though I think Lutherans have priests. But he was dressed in robes and he looked all ancient, and I remember his face like oh, this. I played the Sermon on the Mount for them, so I thought, and the idea that having like someone come in and play something like that, they're trying to, he's saying, we need to appeal to the young people. I don't know. It just still kind of cracks me up. And I'm sure that they have not improved their lot one whit at all. Maybe if they got rid of that pastor, that would improve their lot. All right. All right, we're halfway, or we're close enough to talk about this. Subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies. Click on the like button. For more study songs and more, visit my website. This is all linked in the description below. If you have any questions, send your questions at oraclesofgod.org. I checked yesterday. I hadn't seen anything, and there's nothing on the chat today. Okay. So, now we come to chapter 14. My studio disconnects. I always feel like I should wait. But I realize that the point of a stream is to not fall behind. So, okay. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus. What is a tetrarch? I knew what that was, but I can't remember. It's like I'm thinking one of four rulers. Why am I thinking four? I'm just gonna look it up. It'll be it just seems like something I can't just walk over. That's probably not significant. Thanks a lot. It's the tetrarches. And you know what the definition is, according to Bible Hub? The translation of tetrarches is tetrarch. Arch, I know, is like high, well, first, or, okay, I'm going to look at there's something with a fourth. Okay, I was right. A tetrarch is a ruler over a fourth part of a region. Like if you divide something into fours, they're a tetrarch. Like you have a region and you say, okay, I'm going to divide that region into four. Kind of like the way a count was over a county. A tetrarch was over a fourth part of a particular region. Okay, good. And he said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him. And this is the first we've heard of John the Baptist's death. But yes, he is now dead. For Herod had laid hold on John and bound him and put him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife. His brother Philip was married to a woman named Herodias. It's like, same name as Herod, basically, the female version. For John had said unto him, it is not lawful for thee to have her. So basically, John had said of Herod, it's like, it's not lawful for you to marry your brother's wife. His brother Philip had a wife, Herodias. Herod liked her. So either he forced them to get divorced so he could marry her or whatever, but he took his brother's wife. And John said, that's not lawful. In my family, there was always my father was very strongly encouraged, not just encouraged, it was very strongly taboo to have anything to do with dating someone who was involved with a sibling. If your sibling, I don't know how exactly it was delineated exactly, but he told me of trouble him and his brother had had over women, and he made it very clear that there would be no, that any woman that was involved with a sibling should be considered out of bounds. And that is that is how it ought to be. Verse 5, and when he would have put him to death, he feared the multitude, because they counted him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. He liked watching that girl dance. Pleasing. Whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she would ask. Ask to be the queen. That's what he's thinking. Ask to be the queen in your mother's stead. He was a wicked man. I'll take my brother's wife. And her daughter is lovely. She dances. Ask whatever you will. I don't know what he wanted from her. If he wanted anything. He might have just been trying to impress the people around him. Because God knows he grants her wish based on how they may react. And she, being before instructed of her mother, her mother's a real piece of work. This is what you will ask. Said, give here John Baptist's head in a charger. And that weird configuration, John Baptist's, not John the Baptist. This is a quote. Give me here John Baptist's head in a charger. She doesn't even know what she's asking. She doesn't even know who he is. Give me his head on a platter. And the king was sorry. He didn't like that request. He's sexually immoral. He doesn't particularly want to kill. He doesn't like John. He can't have people speaking against him. This is the first century. There's no free speech. You don't talk against the king. You don't say the king is doing things wrong or things unlawful. Especially if someone's so revered of the people. See, because John was revered by the people. Him saying Herod did badly. Now Herod's got to make an example of him. He doesn't want to kill him, though. He wants to shut him up, so he puts him in prison. And he was sorry, nevertheless, for the oath's sake, and them which sat with him at meat, he commanded it to be given to her. Because he had promised, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. And there were people there. There were witnesses. People who sat with him. And a king cannot be, and this part of it, he knows it's true. He can't be uncertain in his word. Like, well, he has to give her what she asks. Unless it's like something like, let me be queen and you be a beggar within reason, and this is a reasonable request in his eyes. You know, when someone is unrighteous, they're willing to do whatever to maintain their position, to maintain their, not the word dignity so much as, people, they want people to continue to respect them. And he sent and beheaded John in the prison, and his head was brought in a charger and given the damsel, and she brought it to her mother. Here you go, Mom. Real piece of work. Herodias didn't like that. What does he mean it's unlawful for him to have me? You know, she's a real social climber. Was married to the king's brother and now married to the king. Yeah, but corrupt women are a real frightening thing. You know, corrupt men are frightening too. I mean, men will do many violence, and but I mean, in a sense, it's sort of predictable. I mean, you expect the monstrosity of men is and the cruelty of men is kind of, you know what you're dealing with. Women put their cruelty behind this beautiful face, behind this soft touch, which makes it kind of frightening because it's like you get lulled into a sense of security. The reason it's often the treachery of women is sort of more frightening in a way is because every one of us is nurtured by a woman when we're a child, and it seems so contrary to their nature, whereas men, cruelty and a bestial nature seems second nature to us. Like, it's easy to look at me and see someone who could be a cruel monster who could torture and kill, but when a woman is like that, it seems so out of place because they seem so much wired differently that it's so unnatural. But it's not so surprising. I mean, throughout history, this has been the case. And when they go south, this is the way they go south. It's with treachery. They use that nurturing, or let's say the desire that they inspire. She used her daughter to have a guy beheaded. She used her daughter's sexuality to seduce the king. Because what else is the dancing? She was doing cartwheels. I mean, whatever she was doing, it was sexual in nature. We've already established that Herod is sort of a predatory person. I mean, he predates upon his brother's wife, and she sees this and understands the kind of man he is, and so she sends out, and she's all too pleased to be the king's wife instead of she's a climber. And so she trots out her daughter, dance before the king, and he's going to offer you, he's going to say, ask whatever. Maybe this is how Herodias became the queen. I don't know. Philip comes in with his wife. Here, watch my wife dance. In front of the king, and then she does so, and then pretty soon it's like, oh, now she's my wife. Maybe Philip was glad to be well rid of her. I certainly would be. So he had John beheaded. The damsel gave it to her mom. Here you go, Mom. A nice bloody head in a charger. Just what I wanted. Absolutely disgusting. 12. And his disciples came and took up the body and buried it and went and told Jesus. They buried his headless corpse. Verse 13, when Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. And when the people heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, his disciples came unto him, saying, this is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go to the villages and buy themselves victuals, but some food. So John dies, and Jesus kind of goes away to be alone, but the multitudes follow him. On foot, they kind of follow him out. John the Baptist is now dead. People who thought he was the Messiah now are thinking, I guess not. But there's this Jesus who's doing mighty works, and they have a great hope in him, and they follow him. And now his disciples say, send them away. Jesus is moved with compassion toward them and their desire for a Savior. Now in verse 16 it says, but Jesus said unto them, they need not depart. Give ye them to eat. Ye, a lot of times people don't understand like these archaic words. Ye is the plural of you. Whenever you see ye in the King James, they know how to say you. But ye is you all. Like we now say, we use you for both the singular and the plural. But you understand, Greek and Hebrew had singular and plural yous. And the King James is one of the only translations that accurately, or mostly accurately as far as I know, conveys that singularity or plurality. And there are significant places. This is obviously not that significant. Give you them to eat. You would probably understand that as plural, since he's talking to a plural group of people. But there are times when he says you, and then he says ye, and then you understand that at first he's talking to one person, and then to many, or to many, and then to one, and it's useful. It's one of the benefits of the King James, is the fact that they do retain the archaic words, because the archaic English words are actually can oftentimes reflect better the sense of the Greek and Hebrew. And they say unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. And took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. I remember it is significant. I remember Arnold Murray making a big deal about it. He gave it to his disciples and his disciples to the multitude. I remember having that emphasis redoubled to me by another disciple of Arnold Murray. And I was always like, why is that a big important thing? And I still don't know why they emphasized it, because they didn't explain. They said that's the point of emphasis. He gave the loaves to his disciples. You could look at the symbology of that, sure. That from, he gives it into the hand, because everything that we know about God that we haven't discovered on our own. I mean on our own. Not just, I don't mean like on your own studying the Bible. I mean on your own, like sitting somewhere in a field praying to God, looking for answers. Every other thing you know about God, as far as going beyond like that which nature can reveal to you, which is not a whole lot for sure. Everything we know is delivered from the hands of mediators. The Gospel of Matthew is a mediated witness of the testimony of Jesus. It came through some man. He gave the bread to some man, and the man gave it to me. And that's how it all works. The epistles of Paul are a mediated testimony of Jesus. Everything in the Bible is mediated, because every single one of those things was written by some man. There is not one book penned in the Bible by God. No book claims to have been penned by God. This isn't like in Mormonism, they have the golden plates that descended down from heaven. It's never claimed to be that. It's all inspired by God through the hands of mediators. And so the multitudes seek God. They seek the Messiah, and he appoints his apostles. Because that's the way it is with the bulk of people. The bulk of people are struggling to survive. And thinking about God is oftentimes a bit above people's station. Like, they do not think of themselves as worthy of that calling, or suited or fitted to that pursuit. They're not scribes. They're not literate in the Bible. I remember Arnold Murray used to always talk about people being biblically illiterate. And that was a terrible Oklahoman accent. Because he's taught from Arkansas, but the guy's from Oklahoma. Which is not a far, it's nothing. A lot of good people come out of Oklahoma, right? So, not all the common people think themselves fitted to it. People are not all, not everyone's going to be an apostle. He gave some apostles, some prophets, some teachers, some helps, some healings, some gifts of tongues. I mean, there are different gifts. And for some people, they're so caught up in the struggle for existence, that religion is a tenuous affair for them. They know they need God. They know they need some sort of salvation, some sort of faith, deliverance from their iniquities and sins. And so they come to him. And like I said, you don't have to bring forth 100-fold fruit. We all have to contend with the weeds, with the affairs of this life, with the deceitfulness of riches. Certainly with the affairs of this life. We don't all have to deal with the deceitfulness of riches, because we do not all have riches wherewith we may be deceived. Right? I don't have riches. I told the Lord I would like to deal with that problem. I've learned about poverty. I've dealt with lack. Relatively speaking. Look at where I live, in a nice home, in a nice country, right? People have seen. It's not an extravagant home. Like, the room you're seeing is fully 1/3 of the entire downstairs. And upstairs is half as big. And 10 people live here. Behind me, you can see that right above my head, that's a desk where 3 of my children sit to do school. To my left, there are 2 desks where 2 more children do school. And directly behind me, right here, see where my hand is intersecting, there's another desk where a child has to do their school. And behind the bookshelf, there's space for other children to do their school. And there's not quite enough room for everybody. And I'm not saying it's fine. It's fine. But I'm just saying it's not extravagant. By American standards, it's poverty. But that's by American standards. By world standards, and I've checked this, I'm in the upper middle. So, and I think that's about right. Upper middle. Though in America, it's not the upper middle, But that's, I don't compare myself to, to rich folks, but do we have enough? That's what I compare myself to. Are we starving? Oh, we're not starving. We're doing well. Are my bills paid? Or will they be paid soon? Am I working so that my bills may be paid? Will there be funds to pay the bills? If that's all right. If I find a way, then I'm all right. But I would like to deal with the issues of wealth, right? I work hard because I want to make money, because I'd like to get ahead of things. Plus, there are things I'd like to do. But so that's a little bit of a sidetrack. I really got sidetracked there. The point was basically this: that people's religions, right? They don't have, like, I am very much consumed with survival. That is mostly what I do. I've been doing Bible studies for years, but like for years it was once a week or less, because of the struggle to survive. And even so, I try to bring forth fruit to God. And now I do this at least daily on the weekdays. I want to incorporate the weekends, but it's like sometimes it's like I got to catch up on sleep, and this is the only time I have to do my study is early morning. So the weekends sometimes I'll take off. I took last weekend completely off just to sleep in. And that's fine. But people have things, they're not ready to be apostles, disciples. They're just trying to come to God because they need Him, because they need to be blessed. And oftentimes, I think I sort of talk about that as being, I don't talk about that specifically, but I warn against a nominal Christianity that isn't serious. We need to bring forth some sort of fruit. It doesn't have to be preaching the gospel. It doesn't have to be handing out bread to other people. But it can be the effect of having eaten of God's bread being changed. We should not just come and take and then say, okay, we're fine. We're full. We have no need further. And it makes me feel like jumping ahead. As you know, in this parable, as you may know, there's going to be a lot of crumbs left over, and they take up all these baskets. And Jesus says that has something to do with the scribes and Pharisees, the leaven. There's some sort of, the people have come to be filled of Christ, but they've already got something filling them up. So they could not take in everything he was offering. Let's continue to read the passage, and then that's all I have to say about the mediation of the apostles. And they did all eat and were filled, and they took up of the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. He had 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and now they're taking 12 baskets up. Numerically, that's a significant number. The 12 tribes of the children of Israel. And there's often a significance in numbers, but I don't make a big deal about it because I just, it's like, well, it's the same as the number of the tribes. How does that help you become more Christ-like? I don't know. How does all that? That's the kind of knowledge, the biblical knowledge that, while true and maybe significant, it has a tendency to puff us up. Like, I know the significance of the numbers. And unless that number is helping you get Satan's number, so to speak, to meaning, like when you say you have someone's number, I've got your number. That is a significant kind of knowledge. When you know how to defeat someone or something. That's what that means. Like, I know how to defeat you. I have your number. But understanding the significance of the 12 baskets is, if that's even the actual, if that itself is even significant. And the fact that they took out the fragments is significant. The number of fragments is less significant. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside women and children. There were about 5,000 men, and then there's women and children. That's going to be more than triple. There's always, if you have women and children, there's... Well, it doesn't say more than triple, but we're going to talk... Maybe it was primarily men. And some women and children among them. It's by no means an equal number, necessarily. Usually we want to think of it, well, for every man there's a woman. For every woman there's a child, or 2 or 3. But these could be young women, old women. We have no idea. And straightway, immediately, Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. So he says, get into a ship, we're going away. You guys go ahead. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when evening was come, he was there alone. So he's up in a mountain, his disciples, he constrained. That means he ordered them to go into a ship. Verse 24, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea. It's the Sea of Galilee, a big lake. And those big lakes can have quite severe storms on them, right? Tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrary. Sometimes when the wind blows a certain way on a body of water, it can have a very severe effect. And in the 4th watch of the night, that's late, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a... I remember people gave me a hard time for this, but that would freak me out. I would be freaked out seeing a guy walk on the ocean, saying it is a spirit, and they cried out for fear. Because, you see a guy walk, you don't know immediately that that's Jesus. That's not even your first thought. Your first thought is unnatural, wrong. People, they don't have dudes walking on the water. They're not going to assume, oh, that's the Lord. They're going to assume that is a terrifying thing. That's frightening. They're in the midst of the stormy sea in the 4th watch of the night. I don't know exactly what time that is. But, the first watch is going to be, we're talking about watches at night. So if you figure, let's figure the night from 9 to 6. That's a period of, 9 hours? Did I pick out there? Yeah, 9 hours. I don't like that because you can't divide it by 4. Let's consider it 12. Let's call it 9. Well, if you figure it as 12, from like 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., the first hour of the day is 6. So I don't think so. From 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.? I guess so. 6 p.m. could be the first. Why? The evening's coming. The sun is setting. Though normally the sun sets later than that. At least in the sun. I don't know what season of the year it is. I don't know. But the 4th watch is definitely the late part of the evening. I want to say like 4 a.m. is when people are at their most vulnerable. I always remember reading in books about spies and whatever thrillers kind of novels. That when they would when the guy wanted to attack the villains, he attacked them at 4 a.m. because in his experience that was when people were at their lowest ebb. Some people stay up late. But if you stay up till 4 a.m., you're probably by then very tired, even. 4 a.m. is the most quiet time. But it's good. It's always had to have good to have people watching. I have people watching all the time. And when he has sent his multitudes away, so there's the 4th watch. It's the most lonely and quiet watch of the night, 4 a.m., whatever, imagine 4 a.m. I'm just going to say, because that's just before dawn. So it makes sense to call it the fourth watch. Because how many watches are you going to do? You divide them, let's say it's an 8 hour, let's say you count from 10 to 6 a.m. Now you have a nice 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. And someone else can research this. You could find out. I just don't feel like researching it like the watches of the night. It means the very latest. But I think that's terrifying. I think they are rightly terrified to see a man walking on the water in the midst of this sort of, it's not raining, it says, but the wind is blowing and the sea is tossing them, and all of a sudden on this tossing sea some dude starts walking out on the water, on the water isn't just calm, it's freaking going up and down, and he's like walking over it as it's, that's scary. I remember a guy laughing at me like, why is it scary? I'm like, don't you don't put yourself in that position and say like, yeah, that's frightening. Well, you should have known. Why? Why should they have known? Why should they have known? Why would they know about that? But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And I want to save this next part for the next study, because it really is something. Peter asked to walk on the water with Jesus. We're going to pick up next time with verse 28, because I have a lot to say about that verse. It's such a, because there's something that goes on here that is worth mentioning, and I don't want to cut it short with the last 5 minutes of a study. Though we're at 8 o'clock, I guess I started late because I'm only at 50, almost 57 minutes. So it says I got 3 minutes left, but that's about an hour, and that's good enough. Anyways, I'll remind you one more time to subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies, because they're good for you, or they might be. And if you have a question, send your questions to questions@oraclesofgod.org. If it's a question about the study, you could, I should look and see if there's nothing in the chat. I do check the chat. If there had been something in the chat right now, I would answer the question in the chat on the live stream. But if you have a question, a general question you'd like me to address, either with a topical study, you can write me at oraclesofgod.org, or if it's about this study, write me as soon as possible. And if it's about Matthew, I will try to address it in the next Matthew study after I read your question. I don't reveal anyone's personal information. I never do that. I try to be very careful, even here with the screen, because like if I bring up a browser and it overlays the area where my there we go. Did that even do anything? That's weird. So anyways, I'm sorry. I'm just messing around at the end of this day. So thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again real soon. In fact, tomorrow.
I have more understanding than all my teachers, for thy testimony is on my meditation. I understand more than the ancients, because I keep thy precepts.